So I mentioned that this code here defines or configures the request we send to our API. Now, if we have a look at this print function down here, print is a default Python function, so Python ships with this function, and print does nothing else than printing the output or the code to our terminal down here. Whatever should be printed is added between the parentheses in here. And in case of the code example, we see this completion.choices, then the 0 in the square brackets, and then this .message code. Now, if I quickly comment out this by adding a hashtag, then this code will not run when executing our py file. And if I instead add a print statement with just the completion variable, which, as you remember, holds the actual logic to send the request, and if I then run my code again and ask what is a tomato, then we get a longer response. This works because our completion variable here not only stores the logic to create the request, but also the response we receive from the API. And inside this response object, so inside the code we receive from the API, we can find many different keys. We find this choices key, for example, which we accessed right here in our out-commented print statement. We have a unique ID, we see the model that we are using, we see the endpoint, so the chat completion endpoint, and we see information about the tokens used to complete the tasks, so for the output, and for the prompt. So we had 82 and 14 tokens, and in total we have 96 tokens. This is obviously interesting to see how much this request actually cost you. So if you would, for example, add .usage here, and now rerun the code. What is Germany's biggest city? Then I only get back the values stored inside this usage key. And the values stored in there are actually stored in another, dictionary if we talk in Python logic. And this dictionary contains 3 keys, the completion, the prompt, and the total tokens. And these key value pairs are then printed to the screen. In the default case, instead of accessing the usage key, we access the choices key, this one right here. And choices contains a list, as we can see it with the square brackets, and we can access this list with this syntax here. And now inside this list, we have other keys we can access. Finish, reason, index, or message, as we did it here. But inside message, we also have content and once again role. I'll come back to this in a few minutes, but the content obviously contains the response, so the output the API created. So if I now want to access the content inside my message key, I can simply add content here in my print statement. So now, by again running the app, asking something like, why is spring awesome? Then I get back the value of this content key, so to say, again, cut off due to our maximum tokens limit. But with that logic, you can access exactly the information you require from the response object you receive from the API. Now, if we go back to the default case where we access the message and run the code again, and ask another question, then we are inside this message key once again with the content, which we know already, but also with the role. And we actually had the role already inside our messages parameter up there. There we had the role user with the user input as content. Here we have the role assistant with the API response as content. So obviously the messages parameter and these roles are the next core concept we have to understand when working with the OpenAI APIs.